Welcome to Unsilent with your hosts Dave and Brian. This is not another current events podcast. We're digging deeper, diagnosing, and discussing what's really going on today, how we got here, and providing observations for future generations.
Welcome to Unsilent. We're Brian and Dave. We'd love to hear where you think we got it right and where you think we got it completely wrong, which you can do by visiting unsilentpodcast.com or visit our Rumble channel or other social media places where you can leave a comment. So, Brian, momentous times, interesting changes to the world since we were last video face-to-face.
Yeah, you know, with the thought that I've been having for the last several hours is that saying that there's years or decades where nothing happens and there's weeks where decades happen.
Yeah.
And it very much feels like we're in the midst of the latter there. But before we get to that, there's no shortage of things to talk about. I want to take a moment just to explain to Kenny G something is very anecdotal. It's a very personal experience I had, but I think it kind of illustrates changes that are not political, not religious, but are meaningful in our society. So bear with me for a minute. I'm going to tell you a quick story here. And you tell me if it's on point with like a representing other things that are happening that are not political, and a lot of things we talk about a lot. But my wife and I went to Nashville for about a little over a week, a couple weeks ago. Actually, it was right before the election, and so I didn't talk about it now because the election happened, and that was obviously a huge thing to talk about, right? So we're flying from Nashville to Phoenix, and Our flight was delayed about an hour. All right, no big deal. Like that happens, not a big deal. But we get about 20 minutes from landing, and the flight crew makes the announcement, "Hey, we have folks who are catching connecting flights, and if you would, like, please stay seated when the plane lands and let them go first." And they listed like they're going to places like Honolulu, so a family vacation. They're leaving Nashville going to Honolulu. Not a lot of options of how to do that, right?
Yeah, right.
A couple people were going to like Cabo or Cancun or some Mexico destination, again, vacation kind of thing. And then they had they listed like maybe 3 or 4 other places people were going, but there was like 6 flights where they mentioned specifically because we ran an hour late, these people are going to be like running to the gate to make the plane, right?
Right.
They tell us that about 20 minutes out, we land, we pull up to the gate, they tell us again, and 40% of the plane stands up. 40% of the passengers on the plane stand up and just exit as usual. And my wife and I are sitting there just looking at each other in disbelief. Yeah. I mean, we've been in that exact same situation before because flights run late. It happens. We fly a fair bit, so it wasn't unusual for us to see that. But we remembered a specific incident where of the few that this happened to us. And by the way, sometimes we're the person running for the gate. Like that's happened to us as well. But we remember we recalled a certain time. We don't remember what airport. Doesn't really matter. We landed. The people had to get off as fast as possible. There's 10 or 12 or 15 or whatever people. Everyone stayed seated, and we're actually like cheering them on as they left the plane, like encouraging, like, "Go, yo, come on, you can do it!" Like literally like cheering them on.
Right.
And we were thinking, okay, that was probably 5 years ago that happened. That specific incident we were recalling happened. And fast forward to today, and 40% of the plane, just like business as usual, they just stand up and they block the aisleway, and all these people stood up, start getting their baggage from the overhead thing, and the flight crew comes on again and says, "Hey, don't forget, we got these people who are trying to get off." Nobody pays any mind to that.
Wow.
And then maybe 2 minutes later, nobody's going anywhere because, the whole plane's standing up in the aisleway. Like you can't get anywhere. And so then the flight crew comes on and says, "Okay, we think everybody got off who's in a hurry." And the people who were stuck at the back of the plane who were trying to get off were like yelling, "No, we haven't gone anywhere. There's all these people in our way. Like we've got nowhere." And I just thought that is again, it's anecdotal. It's one thing. Who knows? Maybe those 100 people had medical emergencies, or okay, fine. There's plausible reasons why people might have done that, but excluding things like that, like it just struck me as how our society has changed in just 5 short years, maybe 4 short years. of just being so self-centered and
Yeah.
not really interested in what's in it for anybody else. I was blown away by that.
Well, I kind of think it's this I don't know, hardening. I don't know if you want to call it that, kind of the hardening of of people's hearts in a society where everybody's at each other's throats, and where
Yeah,
people are like, well, these people are less than human because they don't vote like I vote, or these
yeah,
people or they don't look like I look, or they
yeah,
don't believe the cause that I believe in. So, I think there's really kind of I think that's a symptom of a society wide kind of hardening of hearts. There's a scripture comes to mind, not to preach or anything, but there's in the book of Matthew, there's a scripture that says, because lawlessness will abound, the love of many will grow cold. And the idea behind that was a prediction of hard times, prediction of the end times. And the idea is that because everything is just so kind of lawless, and you're in it for yourself, and there's no real moral structure, that
yeah,
people's concern and love grows cold. And I
yeah,
that seems to be an explanation that I think makes sense.
yeah. I mean, I was just picturing, like, taking you and your spouse taking your three kids on vacation to Hawaii and missing
Yeah,
the flight. Yeah, now who knows? They would have missed it. I don't even know if they missed it. I don't know if they made it. There's no way for me to know that
sure.
stuff. I waited till everybody got off before I did, got off the plane or whatever. But it just really struck me, like, how selfish, and it just, I don't
Yeah,
remember it being like that. Now maybe I was in a bubble and it was happening. I didn't notice it. Again, there's tons of variables. Maybe all those people had an emergency. Maybe they're all going to pee their pants. I don't know, but it was just really jarring to sit there and watch people just disregard all that. And maybe they had their headphones on and didn't hear. There's tons of quote unquote plausible
sure,
reasons
sure.
why.
But I
I don't
think you
know. It
can
was just
see it
really
in other
scary.
areas too. I think if you look around, you can see it. You can see it at grocery stores. Sometimes you
Yeah,
can see it on the road.
yeah.
Certainly, I mean, there's always been road rage and that type of thing. But I don't think I don't think it's an isolated incident.
No. Well, it was sad, and I thought it was worth pointing out. All right. So
Yep.
speaking of treating people differently who vote different than you, did you see the story about FEMA passing over the Trump houses and during the
Oh yeah,
hurricane? Why
yeah.
don't you explain to explain to Kenny G? By the way, when
Well,
we say Kenny G, we're talking to a guy who lives, 50, 60 years from now in the future, who's undoubtedly going to be looking back this time, wondering to himself, what the hell are these people thinking? So that's what Dave and I are here doing, is telling him what the hell we were thinking.
we're doing our best. Yes. Well, yeah. So we've had two big hurricanes in Florida just recently, and during the last one, was it Milton? What was that? Melt some
Yeah,
an M.
I
Anyway,
think it was Milton. Helene and then Milton, I think.
I
Yeah.
think it's Milton. Yeah. So anyway, there was reports after a study or investigative journalism by the Daily Wire that found a particular person, to start with at least, who was a FEMA on the ground in a leadership role, who actively avoided houses to go up to and to assist that had Trump signs. And
Yeah.
the interesting thing about this is that she got fired, and FEMA said, "Oh, this isn't our consistent with our values, and we treat everybody the same, and we're agnostic and all that." And then she starts doing interviews and said, "Well, no, FEMA leadership is lying to you, and we have this rule on the ground." And she said, "Ask anybody. We have this rule on the ground to avoid any house that could be dangerous or could be risky." And that's why the Trump houses were avoided, because they were deemed
Dangerous slash
dangerous.
risky is a euphemism for also including people who don't vote the way you would like.
Who don't share your political values and views. Now, I mean, she said that that's widespread. I'm sure that will be investigated, and we will find out whether or not that's true or not. I mean,
Yeah.
it's disturbing enough if it's one person in a
Yeah.
leadership position. It's even significantly more disturbing, although not inconsistent with the behavior of
Right.
big bureaucracy, if that's widespread.
Yeah. Also, consistent with current trends, immediately after Daily Wire broke that story, all kinds of progressive, websites and social channels and news outlets immediately came out and debunked it as as a conspiracy theory and things like that.
Yeah.
And then I think the next day they produced an image of the screen, which I'm looking at right now, and it says like here's presumably it's instructions on how to do this thing. The first thing it says is implement best practices. Next thing is no one goes anywhere alone. Those all make perfect sense.
Sure.
Number 3, avoid homes advertising Trump.
Yeah. I mean, it's in writing. It's in writing.
So again, consistent with the current theme is a thing is reported that is not anti-Trump, I think is the best way to say that. Progressive pundits of whatever sort come out and call it a sham and a hoax and a conspiracy theory. And then some period of time, which is when you and I first started doing this over a year ago, that period of time was like 18 months, and then it's kind of shrunk to 6 months. And in this case, it was like the next day.
The next day,
it's like, here's the image, and the gal is fired, and on the news like a day after that. So within 2 days, with this whole cycle where the thing is revealed, the progressive news calls it a conspiracy theory. It's proven with fact, and we're still waiting for retractions from the likes of newspapers and things like that, none of which is likely to come anytime soon.
Yeah, I was going to say, I wouldn't hold your breath on that one. That's I don't think Joy Reid's going to be standing up and saying on The View that, oh, we're sorry, this was not true. I mean, it's and it happens in two directions with the predominant media. It's like the Hunter Biden laptop story and all the career intelligence officers. It's got all the hallmarks of a Russian disinformation campaign. So there's all that. Oh, whatever the right says, that's just a conspiracy theory. But then the real, actual conspiracies, like Trump is a Russian agent and they investigated for years on end, and Adam Schiff camps outside CNN to say he's got the news that's going to break any day. That just we don't remember that. What Oh no.
Yeah. The reminding of the thing that happened then becomes the new conspiracy theory, and that's not what they meant. Right. And there was a comma and an apostrophe.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. It's just and you wonder how much of that will be mitigated now, or if it will just accelerate now that Trump has taken off, or not taken office, but will be taking office.
Speaking of which, I wasn't planning to talk about this, but you bring up an interesting point that I think is worthy of noting for Kenny G. There's an odd quiet happening right now post-election. Now, so as you and I are recording this, we're 8 days from the election. I saw a little kerfuffle happen in Seattle. Of course, Antifa was going to go up there and take over the Chop Chad zone because
that's what else
you have to do on a Tuesday night in Seattle besides go Antifa. That's what you have to do. Does it seem eerily quiet to you, or am I being paranoid?
No, I don't think you're being paranoid at all, because I mean the level of angst about his election is over the top, beyond anything I've ever seen. And so I would have expected by now, at least in the bluest of blue cities, we'd be seeing significant protests that we're not seeing now. Is it that it's kind of like that big sneeze? You go,
yeah,
and when you go, and you really go,
Yeah, you really go.
Is it that, or is it, we're planning on our big explosion at the inauguration, or just before the inauguration, or I will tell you, what I think it is. This is a pure guess. I have no idea, but it's a pure guess. I think it is that they were taken so completely by surprise, not just in terms of, and the real linchpin of how by surprise they were taken is the fact that he won the popular vote.
Yeah.
If it would have been, he won the electoral college, but she won the popular vote, then it's like, to the streets, pitchforks, that type of thing. Yeah. But the fact that happened, the fact that so many different demographics that have been solidly Democratic are moving away, the fact that almost every county in the nation is more red than it was before, even if it's not. I mean, Washington's still deep blue.
New Jersey was within 5 points or something like that. That's unheard of.
That's unheard of. I mean, in New York, I mean, you just see all these places that did what they were not supposed to do. So I think my sense of it is that all of that caught people so by surprise at how it wasn't even close. I mean, it just wasn't even
okay, I'm
close.
going to push back a little bit here though, because they wouldn't have known that before the night of the election.
Sure.
Why weren't there pallets of bricks in certain cities? Like, why weren't they prepared? Like the case you made of like
Sure.
him losing the popular vote but winning the electoral college vote, that was kind of in the cards. Like they were calling it a very tight race. Like both, whether you're conservative
Sure.
or progressive,
Sure.
everyone was saying it was a very tight race. They
Yep.
they raised $1 billion on the Harris campaign.
Yeah.
And we can come back and talk about how she spent that on the celebrities. I think that's kind of fascinating. But
It is.
it was framed as being a very tight race. So I agree with what you're saying, but part of me is also like, yeah, but it was plausible that he was going to win the electoral college and lose the popular vote, or
Yes.
have it be too close for their comfort and screw it, we're going to riot anyway.
Exactly.
It feels weird that the shoe didn't drop.
Yeah, well, I heard somebody posit that it may be because people are just tired of rioting. I don't know if that's true or not.
Dave, come on, who gets tired of a good riot? I mean, come on.
I guess well, the other thing is it's cold now. One of the reasons that I think that
It wasn't the winter of love.
No, because exactly. I mean, in the summer 2020, it's warm. People are out of school. There's actual. There is scientific evidence that there's more terrorism in hot climates than there are warm climates, and specifically when it is hot. I mean, that's an actual. People have wondered for years. This is a little bit of a tangent, but people have wondered for years. Well, why are there so many terrorists in Africa? What's the deal with that? Boko Haram and the brush wars and all that. Well, I mean, because you got a lot of young men who are hot and sweaty, and it makes them mad, and so they go do bad things.
You can't sleep, you get irritable. You take a brick through somebody's window. That makes perfect sense. Yeah.
And so here, it's November. It's not so warm anymore. I mean, it's warm where you are. I was in Texas over the weekend, so it's plenty warm there. But those people don't riot anyway. So maybe that's it, or maybe there is a greater plan afoot. I don't think so though. My sense of it is that this took people so by surprise that there is not yet a greater plan afoot. That's my guess.
Yeah. I think that again, I have no. This is all speculation and conjecture, and I have no idea, obviously. But believe it or not, I'm not in the Antifa Facebook group, so I don't know how this stuff works. But
I'll check with my Evergreen colleagues.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's probably required reading for your weekly email list that you're on for the Evergreen College. You have to make the Antifa blotter. So part of me thinks that they're waiting just for the first thing worthy of protest. And right now, I agree. Like they've been handed a pretty severe blow in that the popular vote, and it was a pretty decisive victory. And
it was very decisive.
And the feeling I have is that and I want to be careful how I say this, but like regular people who just don't want to be bothered with this kind of nonsense are just tired of it. And like, okay, let's just be done with this. And so it wouldn't be rioting against Trump. It would be rioting against the majority of the population now, which is just kind of tired of this, So maybe there's a piece there. Also, in the days after, if let's say that they weren't going to do anything because they didn't expect it to be decided the first night, which is very plausible that they expected to be drawn out for another week or so that they would have planned to do it over the weekend or whatever.
Right.
But pretty quickly Biden came out and was we're going to have a peaceful transfer of power, and we already scheduled our Wednesday lunch, and he's smiling. That, by the way, the smile for Kenny G listening. If you do nothing else about the election, go back and look at Joe Biden's speech after the election and look at the smile on his face. I think that's fairly telling. Yes, I've not seen that guy smile that big since he was elected president. Probably, he had a pretty big grin on his face.
He did.
And then welcoming Trump to the White House, like we're doing the peaceful passing of power. Right. You're fighting against that machine now if you riot, I think. But also a part of me goes, they don't give a shit. They're going to riot if they want to riot.
Well, there's another thing as you're talking that occurs to me, and that is, so as I said in the, communist oblast of Washington State, and
People's Republic of Washington,
People's Republic, and this election in Washington was super, super low turnout. And it was super low turnout, not just on the right, but it was super low turnout for Democrats. And so there wasn't apparently, and I think this is indicative because I think Washington can rightly be said to be the bluest state in the country right now. So
Yeah, it's certainly in the top 3, I would say.
yeah,
Hawaii
I mean,
might be more liberal.
yeah, it could be, but
Yeah.
the thing that's interesting about a low turnout election from Democrats or for the far left progressives in Washington State is that they just weren't all that interested in Harris,
Yeah.
and
Yeah, there
so
wasn't that much enthusiasm.
yeah, so if there's not a lot of enthusiasm, their feelings are probably like not as hurt as bad, or maybe not hurt enough to go out in the cold, rainy weather and riot.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's a
Yeah.
theory. It's a theory.
Okay, so I don't want to spend the whole time on the election, but there's one other thing that we kind of touched on that I have to come back to is this. They Harris raised $1 billion for her campaign, and I think she inherited like 300 million or something like that from the Biden Harris campaign that she kind of inherited. I think I could be wrong on that, but they had $1 billion war chest for advertising and things like that.
Right.
They ended up $20 million in the hole, last I heard.
Yep.
But then reports started coming out of all these big celebrity endorsements that she was getting from Beyonce and Eminem and
Oprah.
The interview was the Oprah was the interview and an endorsement.
Yep.
And then there was like Megan the Stallion and there was Cardi B.
Yeah, Cardi B. There was that podcast.
Oh yeah. So anyhow, we're learning now that she gave reportedly $10 million to Beyonce, $1.8 million to Eminem, a couple $1 million to Megan Thee Stallion, like $5 million to Cardi B. I think I have those numbers right, but they're all in that ballpark. Then spent $100,000 in that podcast to redesign a set in the DC area in a hotel room to make it look like that podcast set. And Oprah, the crown jewel for me is Oprah getting a billionaire, getting $1 million, her company getting $1 million to host this quote unquote town hall.
Right.
I think that kind of stuff getting out there is just hurting the progressives so much. I mean, the idea that you're going to raise $25 from somebody who's in downtown Philadelphia or downtown Minneapolis or downtown whatever blue city to give $25, and you're going to pay a billionaire, their company, $1 million to have that is wild to me. It's shocking. And nowadays it's hard to be shocked about things. That was absolutely shocking for me.
It completely betrays and undermines the progressive ethos,
Yeah.
So and this whole election has flipped all of that, on its head, because you've got big celebrities and big names. Now, Trump had his own big celebrities and big names. He had Musk.
Are they paid though? I don't ever remember hearing this before. I mean, it certainly could have happened. I wouldn't know, but
I mean, it wouldn't matter if Musk was paid because he paid $100 million into Trump's campaign.
Yeah, he's kind of his own category. But take out the
Musk.
But I mean, Joe Rogan wasn't paid. We know that. But in the going back, let's say to the 2012 election or 2008 election, I don't ever remember hearing about celebrity endorsements being paid. Like the idea was they really believe this stuff.
Yeah, and now that maybe it could be that. I bet if it was Obama, they wouldn't have been paid because they believed in him. But I don't think any of them really believed in Harris. I mean, it's probably like, okay, I'll do this, but you're gonna have to make it worth my while because she's not what I want.
I could be blowing it out of proportion, but I think that coming out is just people who believed having one more straw in the camel's back of like this was all nonsense. Right. None of this was sincere. It was all fake.
Yep.
It's all ginned up enthusiasm. It's all ginned up to steer us in a direction. None of this is based on what anybody actually believed. It's all just they're all in on it, except for me, the person who gave the $25.
Yeah, who then looks like the sucker
and feels like a sucker. I didn't contribute to the Harris campaign, so I wouldn't know. But I gotta imagine they feel like a sucker.
Oh yeah,
when you're giving money to the likes of Beyonce and Oprah. That's just nuts.
Well, in contrast, the interesting thing is then, so the Harris campaign was completely inauthentic the whole time. I mean, the whole, I was raised middle class to every answer, every question, that interviewer would ask, the thing about paid celebrities, all that, the whole thing was completely inauthentic. Whereas with Trump, like it or don't like it. He's as authentic as they come. He just
He's as
says
sincere
stuff.
as they come. Yeah. Again, like it or not, what he says, he's sincere in what he says. He's
Yeah,
authentic.
he just says the stuff he says, and it's like, oh well, okay. And he'll say it for 3 hours in a Joe Rogan interview, and
He'll do the weave.
yeah, that I when he said that, the whole thing about the weave, that was really interesting. It's my strategy. I do the weave. In other words, you
Yeah.
just
And it takes a lot of intellect to do that.
well, yes. Well, I mean, you got to admit the guy is on his feet. He is sharp on his feet. It's
Listen,
whatever you think.
he's been doing sales for 12 hours a day for the last like year. I mean, like
Yeah,
he's in full on sales mode, man.
he is. He is. That was it is a shifting of, but this whole election, I think, is a real shifting of all of the ethos. So you get big
Yeah.
money aligned behind Harris more than
Yep.
Trump. You got some big money behind Trump. There's no doubt. Adelson,
Yeah.
all that. But you also have a shift in the working class, where they
Yep.
believe it's much more split now than it's ever been.
Yeah.
And then you've got, and that's where Trump's appeal was, So I think that does signal a shift in terms of our American politics for a generation at least.
Well, the shift I've seen that I think is really fascinating to watch is the progressive pundits. Not all of them. Some of them are very much like, oh, now we know Latinos are racist, and now we know white women can't be trusted, and like there's no shortage of them doing that kind of thing. Still a
Right.
week later,
Right.
but I'd say they're probably 30% or less of those pundits doing that. I
Yeah.
think 70% are saying things like, "Holy crap, butter's $8 instead of $1.19 or whatever."
Right.
Apparently, people care about that more than they do trans people in prison getting free sex changes. Like, who knew? Or to not be so hyperbolic, like abortion.
Sure.
They actually care about how much it costs them to feed their families more than they care about someone they'll never know how far
Right.
they have to drive to get an abortion, things like that,
Right.
right? And I'm not making a case either way on that. Just like I think that they're wrestling with that notion that they were
Sure.
firmly in belief that people it was the inverse was true. And so as all these kind of discoveries are happening and these conversations are unfolding in ways that 2 days before the election you would have been crucified or fired from your job, or if you were a CNN or MSNBC pundit for saying these things, you would have been a pariah.
Right.
To 4 days later, it's like, well, yeah, of course this is how it is. It's
Right.
so wild for me to watch that, like how it's just 180 degrees overnight, and it's unbelievable to me to watch it.
Yeah, it's interesting to see sort of who presaged some of that. So like Jeff Bezos in not being willing to endorse, I think he saw the writing on the wall.
LA Times, yeah.
LA Times. I think, and of course the guy I like to listen to, even though I disagree with him a lot on a lot of stuff about these issues, is Bill Maher.
Bill Maher,
because he's another guy. He's honest. He says what he thinks.
Authentic, yeah. I don't agree with him 70% of the time, probably, but
yeah.
But I believe he's being honest. I believe he's being sincere.
And see, I think in an era like this where we've had so much insincerity for so long, people are just tired of that, and they're ready for even if it's somebody you disagree with. Like, I can listen to Bill Maher talk. There's some of these people, some of these pundits, I can't listen to them talk. It makes me ill. But even so, I think that's what a lot of people felt about Trump. Kind of how I feel about Bill Maher as an example. It's like, well, guy's got a point on this, got a point on this. He's loony off his nut rocker on this, but I'll let that go because I know the loony, and it's at least honest loony.
Yeah. It's funny. We've used the word authenticity, I don't know, 6 or 7 times in the last few minutes here. It reminds me in the book Pendulum, which is a similar thesis to the fourth turning that you and I talk about a lot. Pendulum is they believe that their 40-year cycle is going from me to we, and the zenith of the me, like we just stop caring so much about ourselves and we start caring more about social issues, and there's no really unrest there. The zenith of the we is the zenith of the tribalism and things like that.
Right.
And that's where the chaos happens. So it's a similar theory, but it's a pendulum theory instead of a cyclical theory, right? One of the things that they say as they're describing the zenith of the we end of the cycle is they specifically said, I'll never forget this. They said, this is the era of authenticity.
Ah, interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now that you mentioned that, I remember that. Yeah. Well, yeah. And I think that's people just get fed up with one thing or another. And so it moves in the opposite
I
direction.
think they get a little bit tired of the tribalism, but I think what's really being discovered now is they really they're tired of fake
Yeah.
support of the tribalism. You
Right.
know what I mean? Like the phony things that turn out to okay, well, you can't be Biden and welcoming Donald Trump today as you and I record this to come in and do a meet and greet at the White House. And 3 weeks ago he was Hitler. Those things don't jive. Like
No,
you
they
would
don't.
not do that to Hitler. You would say pound sand. I'm not doing that this year,
Right.
or
Right.
whatever. Right. I think that enough of those things and the celebrity endorsements, all that kind of stuff. I think enough of those things are just showing people that the Trump signs being skipped over in the hurricanes. Like
Yeah.
nobody would have thought 10 years ago you would have been you're absolutely out of your mind if the government's going to. No way
Right.
that people would go along with that
Right.
because hundreds of people would have to go along with that, or thousands of people have to go along with that
Right.
at seemingly quote unquote high levels of government. To no way that's going to happen, and the
Right.
stuff is all turning out to be true.
Well, but see, 10 years ago, 10, 20 years ago, it would have thought to be, it would have thought to have been a conspiracy, you know.
Right.
Today, it's less, I think it's less of a conspiracy. It's more of a culture. So in other words,
Yeah.
you don't have to tell people we're going to skip the Trump signs. Well, of course we're going to skip the Trump signs. They're all Nazis. So
Right.
there's no, you know what I mean? So I
But
think,
ordinary people still hold fast to this belief that we're still in it. We're still, that okay, yeah, you can have disagreements with people, but when people are really in need, like you put that shit aside. I think
yeah,
ordinary people
yes,
believe that we still have at least that,
absolutely.
and that's being shown to be not true. That even in horrific situations where people
Yes.
are decimated from a hurricane,
Yep.
there's still so much of a Nazi we ain't gonna help. I think that
Yeah.
is the part that rubs people wrong. But then to especially find out that people are lying when they say these things to propagate that division,
Right.
I think that's like the real Achilles heel of the whole thing.
Yeah, it is, and it's coming apart. It's coming apart now, and I think a lot of what's coming apart too is the control of the elites. So this election was, to the greatest extent, I think, the most anti-elite, election that we've had. I mean, Trump, he's a millionaire or billionaire, something like that. He is ostensibly an elite. Elon Musk is,
Yeah.
by definition, the richest guy in the world. He's pretty elite.
Yeah.
But it's not even just that kind of moneyed interest. It's the position in society that
Status. Yeah.
makes
Yeah.
one an elite or not, And so that's
Yeah.
where I think in this go around, that's what I think a lot of people were voting against, is the people that were of the demographic that the Democrats could depend on said, no, we don't want to be just pawns in your game anymore, or a
Yeah.
significant portion of them. I mean, Trump didn't win the majority of the black vote. That's true, but he won more of it than anybody
Yeah.
anticipated. Same thing with Hispanic vote, etc. So I think there's a there's a pushback against all that. I do think there's a pushback. I can't remember who it was. Actually, Bill Maher. I think there is a pushback against this sort of cultural Marxism. I think there's plenty of Latino people that said, "Don't call me Latinx." That's
Yeah.
that's debasing.
And
So
don't tell me that my family or my religion comes beneath my support of your candidate. I
right.
think that rubs people,
Oh,
especially people with a
absolutely,
deep Catholic background. I think that rubs them the wrong way.
absolutely.
Um, Before we get to the big story, there's one more thing I think is just again quick for Kenny G to understand the difference in this era versus others. On Twitter there has been they did a vote today again as we record this for the Senate Majority Leader to
Oh yes,
replace Mitch
yep.
McConnell, which many people, including me, are like thrilled that guy is finally aged out
Good.
at
It's
392
engaged now.
years old.
Yes.
Yeah. Um, and so the front runners were Thune.
Yep.
Who was the other ones?
So there's Rick Scott
Cornyn
and
and
Cornyn.
Rick Scott. Yeah. Okay. So Thune and Cornyn. I don't know all the I don't have all the details, but they're perceived as being part of the Uniparty, right?
Sure.
Is that okay? And
Oh
then
yeah,
Rick
yeah.
Scott is
They're
perceived.
more establishment. Yep.
Yeah, they're the likes of Tucker Carlson say that they're more liberal than Democrats, and
Right.
they're not really sure-footed on things like the Second Amendment and stuff like that, right?
Right.
They're wafflers. They're weak.
Right.
It's a perception. I'm not saying they are. I don't know, right?
Sure.
Rick Scott is perceived to be a stalwart Trump guy who's
Absolutely.
like gonna do this thing. It's been fascinating to watch on X the volume and the magnitude of the movement of the people to have their will imposed in how that went down. Now, they ultimately, Rick Scott was not chosen.
Right.
Thune was, but the groundswell and the kind of real life grassroots effort to get Rick Scott to win that. And they did a secret vote, which pisses people off. And I agree with that, by the way.
Absolutely.
Like, the secret vote thing is nuts. But the amount of engagement on Twitter of this thing, which again, 12 years ago, nobody would have even known that there had been an election of the Senate Majority Leader. Like, it would,
what does that guy do?
But for people to be not only engaging in this, but keeping it going, keep it building more momentum all the time in this huge groundswell. Now, again, ultimately, Rick Scott, the guy that everyone wanted to win, didn't win. But I wouldn't be shocked if in 6 months we don't have a change of some sort, because the pressure being put on our representatives to be representative is something I've never seen before.
Yeah. No, I think that's right. And I think one of the things, and there's a lot of pressure on the Republicans and the incoming Trump campaign, or the incoming Trump presidency rather, to perform very, very quickly. And I think for that same reason of authenticity that we were talking about earlier, it's like, okay, you guys said these are the things you're going to do, and we expect you to do them. We expect you to do them now, not, they want to know that this is going to happen this time. So I think there's a tremendous amount of pressure to get cabinet appointments done. Now, it was interesting that all three of the candidates for the leader position endorsed recess appointments before they were even. Now we're getting into the weeds, I suppose. So, Kenny G, recess appointments. You got to get an appointment to go out to recess at school. No, but I think there's a groundswell and a movement, and it doesn't want to let go now that the election is over. It just wants to push ahead, which makes it really a cultural phenomenon.
Well, and a couple of precedent-setting things are in play. One, historically speaking, Republicans are absolutely weak when needed the most. They're absolutely just.
Yes, exactly.
They're just pansies, right? There's that, and historically, everyone knows that when you win the presidency, the Senate, and the House in an election, the next election cycle 2 years later, you're going to lose one or two of those.
Yep.
So you got a 2-year window, and we got 40 plus years of Republicans being perceived as just pansies,
right?
And so I think people they've had enough. Which of course leads to the big story of this week, which I've been tardy in getting to in this conversation, but the cabinet picks and the Doge formation and like all these things. Like, first of all, I would not be being my authentic self if I didn't make a point to say his very first pick, Susie Wiles, a woman, for a guy who's got a reputation of being a misogynist, for his very first pick to be Susie Wiles, the first ever chief of staff, White House chief of staff, I thought was just like lights out. Good for him. Again, I'm not a dyed-in-the-wool Trump supporter. There's things about him I like, and there's things about him I don't. I'm not a blind follower. I didn't vote for him the first time he ran. I certainly did this time, but so these picks, each of them for different reasons, are just an absolute thumb in the eyeball of the established DC area. And I'm here for it. I freaking love it.
Exactly. Well, I love the Susie Wiles one because I really didn't know much about her, much more than about a week or two ago, or maybe a week ago.
Yeah.
I mean, Trump invited her to speak at his acceptance. And she said, no, I don't want to. She's like,
she's known for being very shy in front of the cameras. Yeah.
And she apparently is also known for saying, no, Mr. President, this is not what we should be doing. So,
which explains his disciplined campaign.
Which then also puts a finger in Mark Cuban's eye, who said that, Trump has never had a, powerful woman, or he doesn't surround himself with powerful women.
Smart, capable women or something like that.
Yeah,
he said,
that can push back. So apparently, well, and of course, Mark Cuban he didn't take back that comment, but he did congratulate Trump. So I think he sees the
and
writing on the
and
wall.
he's erased a number of his posts on X about his support for Kamala Harris.
Yes, I didn't know that. If
Yeah.
that's the case, that's funny.
Yeah. Okay. So anyhow, chief of staff, first ever woman, and she's by all accounts like super competent,
Yep.
very disciplined,
Right.
runs a tight ship. Which again, we saw that manifest in the Trump campaign.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
that all makes perfect sense. Which one surprised you the most? I mean, I think they're all phenomenal. I think there's one I'm kind of questionable about, but other than the one I'm kind of questionable about, I think they're all absolutely lights out awesome. And
Yeah.
I'm so excited that they're all just and these are all people who are not cowards.
Yep.
These are fighters. And they're all about, even though they're oftentimes wealthy, powerful people, they're all
Sure.
about they're about diminishing the power of the government, which
Right.
I'm all for.
Oh, I am too. The only one that to me is problematic that I've seen so far is Matt Gaetz. The rest of them, I mean, so you've got, I mean, I was surprised by Pete Hegseth, but the dude has got a resume. I mean, Pete Hegseth would not be a controversial pick if he hadn't been a commentator on Fox News. He just wouldn't have been a controversial pick because I mean he's got.
I was surprised. I thought it was a goof in the beginning when I first saw it. I thought it was like a joke or a meme or something like that, and then I thought it was really true, and I was like, "Holy crap!" I was shocked, and then all the right people got pissed. Elizabeth Warren was talking about how could a Fox comment. So as soon as I heard that, I was like, "He's the guy. He's a great pick."
Well, and I mean, I looked at his resume. I mean, I'm aware of him before, but not as much as I am now. But his resume, his Iraq, Afghanistan, he taught counterinsurgency, two Ivy League schools, a master's in public policy. I mean, there's no way you
written
can say
books
this
on how to reform the government, and is very articulate about what the government's role is and what the role is not. And I was shocked at first, but the more I've had 20 hours to think about it, I think he's like fantastic. He might be my favorite one out of all of them.
I do too. I think he's fantastic. I think I've liked Marco Rubio for a long time. I think he is probably one of the most articulate people in government. So he's going to make a great Secretary of State. I think he'll be
not a coward. Not a coward.
Not a coward at all. And he's also, well, and a lot of these people also have the beneficial or the benefit of being hawks on China. They're not going to be, they're not going to be dissuaded. We've got a special envoy. Who was that? There's a special envoy who was appointed to Ukraine already. I don't remember who that was, but or if I know that. I like Mike Huckabee as the ambassador to Israel. I mean, solid guy. So you just go down the list here, and yes, of course, the Doge. Of course, the Department of Government Efficiency, wasn't it?
Efficiency.
That Elon Musk endorsed some years ago Dogecoin. The
like
Bitcoin.
2 years ago.
Yeah. And so I thought that was just kind of funny too. And then, you're right.
Honestly, I think it started as kind of a goof on Twitter, but then maybe Elon or somebody was like, wait a second, this could actually be a thing. I think they did it as a goof on the Doge thing that he supported.
Yeah.
But then all of a sudden, somewhere along the way, there was an epiphany, like, holy crap, this actually happened. This actually makes sense.
Well, and him and Vivek Ramaswamy, two formidable business people. I mean, obviously Elon's the biggest, but Vivek is, and Vivek's not a lightweight. He's a smart guy.
He's not a slouch. Yeah.
He's not a slouch.
Smart,
so I don't anticipate that department will be some massive bureaucracy. I think it's going to be probably small. I mean, my guess, because
they've already have a stated goal of having their work finished by July 4th, 2026.
Oh, is that right? I didn't hear that. Oh, that's great.
And it's not a government. It won't be a government agency.
Right.
It's some kind of advisory council, or I don't know what the
Blue
framework
Ribbon Commission or something like that is what they call this thing.
Yeah, but it's their goal is to come in, whack the crap out of everything, and be done by our 250th birthday on July 4th, 2026, and be done and having done their job. The only time in U.S. history where a government entity would be designed with the idea of shrinking government, not growing.
Exactly. Well, I can just see the announcement that Elon and Vivek walk up with the spreadsheet. They put it on his desk, say, Mr. President, here's all the departments and all the programs you can cut. Trump signs it, sends it off, and they just go their separate ways. It's like,
Yeah.
I mean, that would be so, well, I mean, it would be such the right thing to do because the government is way, way, way too big and way, way, way too intrusive. And it would be so satisfying because the government has been so invasive in so many people's lives over the last number of decades.
Yeah. No, it's we don't even spend time going through all of them, but I think that those are certainly there's a couple others that are pretty fascinating, but the through line for me so far has been these are people who have been willing and able to stand up against tremendous pressure to cower, and they didn't.
Right.
And they're absolutely a thumb in the eye of establishment DC, which
right.
again, I'm all for it. Like,
but the other interesting thing about that, though,
out of whack.
A number of these guys, a number of these people, not guys, but a number of these people also know establishment DC. So they understand it. So they're not, so they're not just coming in from the cold and trying to figure out how DC works. Marco Rubio knows how DC works. A lot of these people, they know how it works. So I think this time around versus last time around of the Trump presidency, he's going to come in prepared. He wasn't prepared for what happened last time.
And that something I've been thinking about for like 2 months, I haven't really talked about here because honestly, I've been kind of scared. Is not scared to talk about, but scared of what the results would be. And I tried to find the clip today from Neil Howe, and I couldn't. The video I thought it was in, he didn't talk about it, but he talks about these periods of time that are in the fourth turning, but not during the real gnarly part or the big resolution part. They precede that era, right? So it's not the fight in Berlin. It's things that happened 6 years before that or 4 years before that. But he talks about these periods of time where we just get a lot of shit done in a very short amount of time, and we make very consequential changes to governance, often through legislation, things like that, but not always. And policy changes that are very significant, and we do them very rapidly. And up to the election, my fear was if Harris wins, that's where the padding the Supreme Court would come in. The getting away with the filibuster, like they had an agenda that they were going to do in the event that would have been really meaningful changes, and I would consider not so positive.
Very poor changes.
And now you can already see the momentum going. Like, this is going to be hard and fast, and it's going to be meaningful. You don't have players like this involved and dance around the edges of problems. These are players who are going to hit it hard and fast, and they are not cowards. They're ready to fight. They're smart. They're articulate. They know what they're up against. They aren't going to be surprised. And the reason I'm bringing this up is it fits perfectly in Neil Howe and Bill Strauss's thesis of the fourth turning. It's one more thing to support that, we're not special. We're not the anomaly. This is just how history works.
This is how it always unfolds. It's happened this way before, and it's happening this way again. Well, and then every time that is confirmed for me, it says, okay, well, this is kind of the roadmap ahead from here. This is what it probably is going to look like ahead from here. And so, how can we be prepared for that more, mentally and emotionally than anything else? Because there's tough times coming. But I do think, when was it that you and I texted? I think it was either right before or right after the election. And I said,
right after, I think,
it was right after that, Trump really is shaping up to be what they call the gray champion, the gray leader, the one that he's not picked for you could say that it's destiny or whatever, but he's not picked for the job because he's, a saint or whatever, but he's picked for the job because he's the person for the season that we're in. And it's very possible. There's lots of things that they have an intention of doing, and I'm sure they're going to accomplish a lot, but more than likely there will be something before it's over that derails everything and causes that focus of attention to need to be on this existential problem. So that tells me we're very, very close to that kind of, existential crisis that we have to go through.
I remember when you and I had a phone call for about a half an hour before we started doing this podcast, talking about starting this podcast. We were kicking around who the great leader was going to, a great champion or whatever it was going to be. And we both kind of dismissed Trump as being like, he was kind of a flash in the pan. I don't think it's going to be him.
Right. I know.
Turns out you and I know nothing, right?
Well, exactly. I mean, yeah. Well, and see, that's exactly it. Because he did not look to me. Okay, the guy who ran The Apprentice was a TV. He's a
Yeah.
TV salesperson and a negotiator, and this is what he does, and runs golf clubs and stuff. It's like, this is the guy. Well,
Yeah.
there you go. For such a
Yeah,
time as this.
the one thing that Neil Howe did say in the video I watched today, he was talking about historically, because the guy asked him, like, what are you excited about? Like, because there was a listener question, and like, of all people, you should be the most freaked out, Neil Howe. You wrote the book on this, and
Right.
you're the least freaked out. Like, how
Right.
could that be? And he basically said, it's exciting because we can't, like, if we just had growth all the time with no challenge, like that's that's not sustainable, right? It's
Humanity
not,
doesn't
you can't do
advance.
that. You have to have adversity. You have to have
Yeah.
this stuff. And then you led into all the previous fourth turnings for the U.S. The government has had to grow because it had bigger problems, more people. Like,
Sure.
And he said, in this case, the government has to shrink. Now, he's not a Trump guy by any stretch.
No.
He's not really a Harris guy either. He's probably indifferent to all of it because he believes that, like, whatever befalls us in the future, like, the person in charge doesn't have many choices. Like, Kennedy
Right.
didn't have a lot of choices. Like,
Right.
you community missile crisis, you in the world, you don't,
Right. Yes, exactly.
yeah. So anyhow, he was saying that this will be the first time, though, the first fourth turning where the government will have to shrink at the same time as taking on these magnificent,
Great challenges.
huge problems.
Yeah.
Where all the times before they just grew the government to satisfy that. That is not going to be a tool in our arsenal this time. So really fascinating to hear him talk about that. Anyhow, and all these people, and by the way, he recorded that 3 months ago. He had no idea that this was he had no idea that these people were being picked for these cabinet positions who are all about shrinking the government. So again, just he keeps adding credibility to his thesis. I as much as I am dreading it, it's nice to have a little tiny peek into the what's ahead of us, more so than we would have 20 years ago.
And I think if you think about the whole process of the churnings and the fact that we've gone through, we go through them on a very regular basis in a long time, not in our simple short lifetimes, but we go through them over and over and over again, and we come out in some way better afterwards. I mean, not in every way, but we come out in some way better afterwards, more prepared, more advanced as a society. That tells me that yes, the difficulty and the struggle will be painful, and I'm not in it right now, so I can say, yeah, it's going to be good to go through it, but I'll probably change my tune, if there's food shortages or whatever.
5 years, right?
but at the same time, having the viewpoint that it's not just steady downhill and that's the end of things. I think it's an encouraging, if not sobering, philosophy or understanding of history.
Yeah. Well, the current situation we're in, there's no shortage of things to talk about. We went through a couple stretches over the last year or whatever it's been, where we had to kind of fish for things to talk about, but there's no shortage of things to talk about now. Things are moving at a blistering pace, and big things. It's not a lot of little stuff. It's a lot of big stuff. It's really intense to watch.
And we haven't talked about it too much today, but there's significant, pressure on social issues now that didn't exist before. So I think that will be an interesting discussion, probably too late in today's cast to do it, but I think there'll be a significant discussion about how do social issues and how do the other, big issues that have dominated news cycles over the past 10 years, how are they different now? How are they kind of sidelined? I mean, what's the discussion about climate change right now? Is there a discussion about climate change anymore? So,
I saw headlines that climate change is dead. I saw a headline that said that. I don't remember where I saw it, or what news outlet. But you're right. Like, you look at the climate stuff, you look at the trans stuff, you look at even abortion, which is a very big issue relative to the others. It's probably the biggest, I would say.
Yep.
It'll be interesting to see if new fights are picked, and it'll become clear that the fights were just about topics that they could fight about, or if they really do care about those specific issues.
Right.
And 7 years from now, in the midst of some kind of other crisis, we're still talking about trans rights. It'll be really fascinating to see which of those turns out to be true.
And I got some predictions about that. So we'll talk about that another time.
I do too. All right, brother. Well, hey, as Dave mentioned in the beginning, we're doing our best to explain to people in the future what this time is like, as they're no doubt going to look back and wonder what was happening to lead up to whatever is going to unfold. But we all know it's a meaningful time for sure. We'd love to get your input. Tell us where you think we got it right. Tell us where you think we got it wrong. You can do that on our Rumble channel. You got a great comments section there. You can also go to unsilentpodcast.com. Leave us a comment there. And I think that's it for this week. So until next time, this is Dave and Brian signing off.
See you next week.
Do you want to be Unsilent? Make your voice heard on our social media channels and share where you think we got it right or wrong. Go to unsilentpodcast.com for social links so you can join the discussion.